All right, let's break this down a little bit. You go to school to get a job. Most future employers are concerned with your overall GPA. Not all the time, because some selection committees are interested in specific courses, but most of the time, overall GPA trumps. Your overall GPA is based on how you score in each of your classes. Now here's the important part. How you select those classes can impact greatly your final GPA. For example, if you take a series of classes taught by lenient markers, you're more likely to score higher marks than if you took those same courses by harder markers. Interesting. So the question at the end of the day is, do you have an effective strategy for course selection? If not, that's okay, because in this video, I'll be walking you through my 3-step process for developing your own course selection strategy. Hey guys, welcome to my house. My name is Dr. Michael Holinsky. I'm a management professor at the Ted Rogers School of Management. I use all my experiences in undergrad, master's, PhD, and now as a professor to share unique insights to students to help them better manage their university life. Now, I'm not going to be talking about topics that are typically covered in the classroom. Instead, I'm going to be covering concepts that are covered outside the classroom. In other words, what are the things you typically learn the hard way throughout your university life? So if you're in college or uni or will be soon, hit the subscribe, hit the like button, come along with me on this journey and check out my weekly clips. In this video, me and my TA hiding under the chair over there, we'll be discussing our practical advice for how you should be selecting courses in college or uni. Now, students have a variety of motivations for why they might choose a certain course over another, such as based on interest, ability to work part-time, future career opportunities, or frankly, many of them choose to pick certain classes because they're more likely to find a mate in one class versus another. And people's love life truly does get them to make bad decisions. Or is that just me? In any case, the 3-step process I'm going to be talking about will set you up for success, whatever success might be. But I can't quite promise a ring yet, so don't bank on that. Each step builds on one another and gives you the effective tools you need to make smart decisions. Preliminary brainstorming. Now there's 3 topics we're going to be covering in this step. The first is to identify requirements and constraints of your particular program. Now, a typical undergrad consists of 40 classes. Not all the time, because there are double credits and half credit courses, as well as the idea of people are chasing double majors, double minors, or specific certifications. Regardless, the same principles we're going to be talking about in this general video do also apply to those specific situations. So listen regardless. Those 40 classes are generally broken down into classes you have to take, mandatory or required classes, as well as classes you can choose to take, often referred to as electives. So on a piece of paper, map out all the mandatory and elective courses you have. Now you can do this on a per term basis, an annual basis, or across the entire degree. I generally recommend that you think about it in terms of the long term. Again, your goal is to get a job at the end of schooling. So map it out across those 3, 4, 5 years you might have in your entire schooling degree. If that might seem too cumbersome or you don't have enough insight in what you want to do next year, the year after, then do it at least on an annual basis. Tackle this term and next term, all the electives and mandatory classes you have for the year. So for the electives, scribble down what different types of electives there are. Some electives are free and have no strings attached, meaning you can take an elective across the entire university. Others do have strings attached, meaning you have to select that elective from a particular pool. So for example, you might have 4 electives to select from a pool of 10 classes. For mandatory classes, identify all the classes taught by a variety of professors or in different formats, such as online and in person. The idea is you're trying to identify different variation within these mandatory classes. All of this information is going to be helpful and gives you more flexibility when you're doing course selection later on in the process. The next thing that you're going to want to do is to identify the courses available that match with your strengths. Now, I know that a lot of students are focused on what Steve Jobs said about passion. If you follow your passion, you're never going to feel like you work a day in your life. And I know that sounds good, but the reality is many of us don't know what our passions are early on in our career. And the second thing is that passions often don't pay the bills. They just don't. They're not as employable as skills. The general idea is that skills get you a job. Once you're working, you can refine those skills by identifying a particular niche that you're in. Once you're working in that niche and refining your skills, you can have enhanced job security. Once you have that job security, it gives you the time and exposure to different work settings that allows you to identify what your passion is. All in all, when you're early on in your career or early on in your schooling, identify the classes that match well with your strengths. The next thing you're going to want to do is identify majors, minors, and concentrations that interest you. Now, majors, minors, and concentrations simply acknowledge that you've taken a couple of classes in a particular area. Now, the threshold for achieving a concentration is typically less than a minor, which is less than a major. Now, majors, minors, and concentrations are important for a couple of reasons. First, they focus your learning and education to a particular area, which is great because that means you learn skills and knowledge in that focused area. Two, they can also be critical to signaling future employers what you want to do after school. So for me, as my big MO is all about you go to school to get a job, why not everything you do when you're in school be geared towards positioning you towards that final goal once you graduate? Now imagine, put yourself in the situation where you entered into a program up front, you realize you don't like it, and then you want to change gears. Well, a minor or a concentration can help you do that because it helps signal the future employers, hey, I was initially enrolled in program X, I didn't really like it, so I minored in program Y because I thought it was really interesting. So it can be incredibly important to signal what you want to do after school and better match your narrative, your life with that future employer. All in all, major, minors, and concentrations are important because they, one, help identify what you're going to be learning throughout school, and two, they can strategically signal what you want to do after school. The next two steps actually dive into the specific courses that were identified in step one. I've broken them up into general and specific course details, but let's just start with step two first. Now I've broken up step two into 3 criteria, all of which will help you identify desirable classes. The first is to review professors on Rate My Prof. Now, Rate My Prof is a self-report website to document whether you liked or disliked a certain professor. Now, I should note that none of the information on this website is validated or checked in any manner. So, any information you see on this website should be taken with a grain of salt. Now, your gut check reaction is probably to look at the overarching score and move on. If they have a good score, take them. If they have a bad score, never take them. But don't just do that. Read the actual comments and see what they mean. Why did they get the mark they did? Are they good at explaining things? Are they a harsh marker? Are they a fair marker? Minor aside, one of the best compliments I ever received was that I was a fair marker. I don't want to be a harsh marker or a lenient marker. I just want to be fair to my students. And more importantly, are the comments changing over time? Sure, when we first start off, no professor is really good at teaching. The best professors are the ones that are able to change and able to improve year over year. A last thing you're going to want to look at, what courses are the comments associated with? As professors are better at teaching certain topics over others, you're going to want to make sure that those comments, whether they're positive or negative, are associated with the course that you're specifically interested in taking. All in all, you're going to need to do a little bit of homework to see whether you would like being taught by a professor within a particular class. The next consideration is time of the class. Now, I know it might seem obvious, Mike. Of course, I'm going to be looking at the time of the classes when I'm selecting the classes. And yes, it is obvious. But it is still important, and I want to talk about it for 3 reasons. The first is, are you a morning person or are you a night owl? Now, I know it's really sexy to be a night owl, particularly in undergrad. Everybody wants to be this party animal, right? Like, that makes sense. But between you and me, you don't have to tell anyone. For instance, for me, I'm a morning person, and it's okay. I think clearer, and I can be more critical between the hours of 8 to 10 in the morning than I can between 8 and 10 at night. And as a result, I tried to find classes that were always geared towards that morning because I just did better in them. On the flip side, is there a time of the day where you like to have a siesta or think a little bit slower? And can you avoid those times? The second piece is there a big night of the week that you love to socialize and love to party, right? Let's face it, student life is about having fun and making mistakes, okay? So one of the things we want to do is try to avoid being negatively impacted from that party lifestyle, okay? So if everybody goes out and your town is really big at having a big party on Tuesday nights, don't select a class for Wednesday, because whether you have a class on Wednesday or not, you're still going to go out on Tuesday. So the best thing you can do is to not have a class on Wednesday. So I'm guessing in hindsight, we should actually be figuring out your drinking schedule so that we can then align it with your class schedule. Should I be saying that? And the other thing is to align it with your friends, because your friends are going to peer pressure you to go out. So make sure that your schedule aligns with them so that there is as minimal conflict in terms of attending your classes. The third thing you're going to want to think about is whether you like having multiple classes on the same day. Now, some students love having that compressed style and try to even jam like 3, 4, 5 classes into the same day. That frees up opportunities for work, gives them less commuting, and it might even just give them more time to do research, socializing, or do their homework on those other days. Okay? But one thing to keep in mind with this is that learning and listening is fatiguing. Okay? Even if you're doing it even if you're doing it at home in a remote environment. Learning and listening is fatiguing. Surely you're not going to be as keen or critical or listen as effectively later on in the day as you are earlier. So if you're really striving for those high GPAs, you're going to want to make sure that there's only 1 or 2 classes you have per day. And now we're going to talk about teaching mode. Are your classes in-person, virtual, or hybrid? In-person means you physically have to attend the class. Virtual means that you can learn from the comfort of your own house. If your class is at 8 in the morning, you can learn from the comfort of your own bed. Now there's 2 different types of virtual learning, asynchronous and synchronous. Asynchronous means that there are no set times for classes. You learn at your own pace. You complete assignments, you read the chapters, you can do it whenever you want. Synchronous means there are set times for specific lectures or labs. So it's the idea that professors will be teaching over Zoom or Teams at specific times, and you have to attend at those particular times. Hybrid is something that merges both in-person and virtual learning. Now, you should be able to identify the teaching mode based on your school's websites for each class. In specific cases, you might actually even have to email the professor to figure out what their teaching mode is. Do you have a preference for teaching mode? Some students love the idea of in-person teaching. It forces them to get out of their house. If others, on the other hand, they love the idea of virtual. These students tend to have some type of time commitments issues with another aspect of their life that's preventing them from attending class at a specific time. All in all, you're going to have to try to identify online what courses, what teaching mode they're associated with each of your courses, and what your preference is for teaching mode. All right, we made it to the last step. Now, the next 3 items we're going to talk about ask you to consider a few more nuances before making that final course selection. First, what type of assignments are in these classes? Some classes have tons of group work, whereas others have predominantly independent work, but most classes actually have some type of combination of group work as well as independent work. Now, generally, mature students or students who are striving for an incredibly high GPA tend to avoid classes with a lot of group work, as groups tend to have either immature students, students who aren't striving for the same high grade that you're going for, or they might also have social loafers. So they tend to avoid classes with a lot of group work because they don't want a bad group assignment or bad group assignments to pull down their overall GPA. For most classes, you should be able to identify what assignments are typically in that class by looking at old course syllabi as well as course outlines. In some situations, you might even want to check out alternative sites such as Chegg or Course Hero to see if there are any materials available. Now, the next item is class size. Generally, the larger the class, the less one-on-one interaction there is with professors, and the more likely that their exams are going to be multiple choice. One caveat to this is that generally, larger classes also have a greater TA presence. These TAs can teach labs, run seminars, or simply just mark papers. So if you're the kind of person that likes to have more one-on-one time with professors, you're probably going to want to select more courses that are smaller in size. If not, you might be leaning more towards larger class designs. The last point to consider is the year of the class. Are these classes first year or are they upper year? Now, I know you're going to assume that it's easier to get a good mark in a first year class than an upper year class, but you're going to want to think again, okay? The expectations associated with junior classes are lower than the expectations for higher classes. However, upper year classes tend to have higher class averages than junior classes. In other words, professors are more willing to give out higher grades in upper year classes. Okay? Also, if you've been spending your whole years, and you're an upper year student, if you've been spending all those years learning how to learn in a particular area, and you have a skill in a particular area, and that's designed towards a particular area, you might find it very difficult to take a class, even if it's first year, if it's outside your wheelhouse. Let me give you an example from my personal experience where I made that drastic mistake. So I was in my final year of mechanical engineering and I wanted a bird course to increase my GPA a little bit. So I picked first year history. How hard could it be? Write a couple papers, write a couple essays on history, first year mandatory class, big size, no big deal, right? Well, that history mark was the lowest mark I had that year. Who knew that calculating math equations in engineering would be incredibly different than writing papers in history class, right? Well, that was a big mistake. I didn't have the skill set at the time to write any sort of English papers for history. That was a big bust. All this to say is that don't just assume that first year classes will increase your GPA, and to know that sometimes it can actually lower it. All right, guys, that's it. That's my video on the 3-step process to course selection. If you found this video helpful, interesting, or just want to hear about more tips on how to make your student life more manageable, hit the subscribe, smash the like, and check out my video next week. Bye-bye.